How's it going, fellow pickers? For this lesson, we're going to take a look at how to play Lonesome, Moonlight, Waltz on the mandolin. This tune was written by Monroe, and in his recording he features twin fiddles, which is two fiddle players playing together in harmony as opposed to unison. So what I thought would be cool is to use this video to talk a little bit about how to build a harmony line on the mandolin. So what we'll do is I'll play through the main melody once, slowed down with the camera close up on my hands and the tab on the bottom so you can follow along if you'd like. After that, I'll give you some tips and tricks to building a harmony line on the mandolin, and then I'll play the harmony line that you heard me playing on the intro to this song, slowed down again with the camera close up on my hands and the tab on the bottom. If you'd like to find these tabs, as well as every other tab that I have posted and every tab that I will post, you can find that on my Patreon page for just $1 a month. I'm also going to be putting on some other learning tools for this video as well. If you like this video and you find it useful, please hit subscribe, hit that little bell notification so YouTube lets you know every time I post a new video. 1, 2, 3. Alright, so before we start looking at the harmony part to this tune, let's take a moment and talk about how we would build harmonies in bluegrass in general. It's not hard, but there are a few things that you want to know before you get started. The first thing you want to know is what the key of the tune is in general. So this tune is in the key of D minor, which means it has one flat, the B flat. So if we're playing a D minor scale, we'd be playing D, E, F, G, A, B flat, C, and D. But we obviously have a lot of notes on either end. We have a whole G string and a whole E string with notes on it as well. So the best thing you can do to get comfortable with the scale is start from the lowest possible note and go up to the highest possible note in that position. So in the case of D, we have the lowest possible note being the G. So we can play G, A, B flat, C, D, E, F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E, F, G, A, B flat. So from there, we need to be able to identify whatever note we're trying to harmonize into one of two categories. It's either a chord tone or it's a non-chord tone, which kind of seems obvious, but still useful. Still need to approach it that way. So going forward, talking about the non-chord tones, I'm going to just call them passing tones, just to avoid confusion and honestly avoid myself probably just using the wrong term. So between chord tones and passing tones, a chord tone is, as you can imagine, a note that is part of the chord you're working over. So the way that we find those is really simple. It's a set of 3 numbers. So any chord is going to be built off of the first, the third, and the 5th note of a scale. So if we're talking about the D scale, we could think of D, E, F, G, A, B, flat, C, and D. If we take the first note, which is D, we take the third note, which is F, and we take the 5th note, which is A, and those are the notes that make the D minor chord, and they are the chord tones. So basically what I'm going to do anytime I need to harmonize a note is I'm just going to go up to the next chord tone. So if we look at the very first measure of this tune, it starts on a D. So if I'm going to be going from that D and I want to harmonize it or make a harmony part, I'm just going to step up to the F, the next thing in line, or there, however you want to look at it. So if you're not incredibly comfortable with the names of your notes, we can approach this slightly differently by using some shapes. In order to do that, though, we would need to know the intervals between each chord tone. So between the first and the third, or the first note of a chord and the second note of a chord, right? The interval will depend on what kind of chord you have. So if you have a minor chord, as you can imagine, it will be a minor third. And a minor third is one whole step or 2 frets plus 1 half step. So 1 more fret. So a total of 3 frets basically, right? So if I have D, I'm going to walk up 1, 2, 3, and I have my minor third, or in this case, the F. If it's a major chord, the distance from the first note of a chord to the next note of a chord is going to be a major third, which is 2 whole steps. So a grand total of 4 frets higher. So here's my D, 1, 2, 3, 4. There is the F sharp, or the major third of D. All right, so there's a few other ways that we can approach this if you don't want to be reaching really far or playing up the neck by constantly moving up from the note you're at, by going over to the next string and finding our notes there. So basically in any chord, you're going to have those 2 main intervals and then a fourth as well. So if we look at, those are going to be our big shapes. They're basically just double stop shapes. So if I'm looking at the minor third, I'm going to be going back 1, 2, 3, 4 frets and going over to the next string. So if I have my D on the 5th fret, I'm going to take subtract 4. I'm going to be on fret 1 and playing the F, right? And that is the minor third shape. So a major third is just going to be 1 fret higher, right? So if I'm playing the D on the 5th fret, my major third is only going to go back 3 frets. So if I take, 5 minus 3 is 2, right? So that would be our major third, right? So minor third, there, major third, there. So what comes up then if your melody lands on the 3rd note of a chord and you've run out of options, right? So if you have 1, 3, and 5, where do we go from there? We go back to 1, but we would consider it 8, or we would go an octave higher, right? So if I'm on D and I need to get up to the 1, I need to go to a 4th. So I'm going to be going up basically 2 whole steps and a half step. So a grand total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frets. And that will get me to my 4th. So that's how I harmonize the 3rd note of a chord. So the 3rd being the 3rd in a row, right? So it's actually the 5th in the scale. So if I want to do that up here, that's just going to be back 2 frets. So you'll notice that the minor third, major third, 4th are all in line. And the 4th is easy to remember because it's that like foggy mountain shape. We use that double stop a lot, right? So we have minor, major, 4th, and the way that the mandolin's tuned, these are universal, right? So anywhere my melody lies, that distance is going to be a 4th, 3rd, minor 3rd, right? It will always be the same. All right, so the challenge here is remembering which interval to use when. And the key really comes down to the name of the chord. That name of the chord is going to be telling you the first interval. So if I'm dealing in a minor chord, that means the first interval will be a minor 3rd. So the first note of a chord to the next chord will be a minor 3rd. That next interval, so from the 2nd note in a chord to the next note in the chord, will always be major, right? So the first will be minor 3rd to a major 3rd, and then it'll be followed by the 4th to get back to the first note of the chord. On a major chord, it'll be reversed, right? So because it's major, we'll know that the first interval will be a major 3rd. Then the next one will be a minor 3rd because it's flipped, and then a 4th to get back to 1. So if you can kind of keep that pattern in your mind, that the chord is telling you the first interval, just reverse it and do the opposite for the next interval, and then the fourth will always be the next one after that. You should be okay. All right, so as far as harmonizing a non-chord tone or a passing tone, it really comes down to what its relation to the nearest chord tone is. So if a chord tone in the melody is going up to the next note of a scale, the chord tone in the harmony should do the exact same thing. It should go up to the next note of a scale. This is called close harmony, and it's really, really big in bluegrass, both in the vocal side of things and the instrumental side. So if we look at the very first part of Lonesome, Moonlight, Waltz, we actually get a really, really good example of how this works. So the melody itself is starting on the chord tone. It's starting on the very first note of the chord, the D. And then it goes up to the third of the chord, or the minor third, which is that F. And then right back. So if we're going to harmonize this, the melody wants to be, or the harmonies should be the next step up in the chord. So if I'm harmonizing my D, I'm going to go up a minor third. Remember that shape that we talked about? And I'm going to play the F natural. If I'm harmonizing to that next note of the melody, the F, I want to go up to the major third, which is the A. So remember, the minor third will have 3 frets in between it. The major third will have 2 frets in between it. So my harmony line now is just that. The melody so far is that. But right after that, we get to this C natural, which is not part of the D minor chord that we're playing over. So we need to figure out how to harmonize it. So we want to look at what it's doing in the song. We've gone from a chord tone, and we've just gone down to the next step below it in the scale. So down to that C. So what we want to do then in the harmony is the exact same thing. So if I'm playing the F, I want to go down to the note below it in the scale, the D minor scale, which would just be the E at this point. And one thing to be aware of is that going from D to C, I have to go down 2 frets. Going from F to E is going down just 1. So your intervals won't always stay exactly the same, but they harmonize really well. All right, so let's take a quick moment to look at 2 instances where the chords step away from the D minor scale. So the first one is measure 5, where we have an A7 chord. So obviously this is major. One of the interesting things about minor keys is that the 5th chord gets turned into a major chord, and this has to do with voice leading. So our melody itself is just playing an A. If you're trying to stick with your D minor scale, you would end up with a C natural, which would sound awful because the guitar player is going to be playing a C sharp. So you want to make sure that you're paying attention to whether or not the chord is major or minor. And in this case, if we have A as our 1 in the melody, we're going to move again up to the next note of the chord tones, which would be its major third. And if you remember from the beginning, the major third is just going to be up 2 whole steps or 4 frets. The next instance that I want to talk about is measure 21, where we have a G major scale. This is actually stepping outside of the key a little bit, because in a minor key, the 4th chord should normally be minor, right? So if we're thinking of D as our key, D, E, F, G, the G is expected to be a minor chord. They're making it a major. So again, the melody is starting on the 1 of the G chord. And we want to make sure that we're paying close attention and that we remember to harmonize it with the major third, which is going to be the B. And we're using the opposite approach here that we did for the A to get to our major third, which is going over a string and going back 3 frets. All right, so I know this stuff can be tricky. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I'll try to answer them. But otherwise, let's just take a look at what the harmony looks like for this tune. 1, 2, 3.